So the AFL has just announced the biggest change to the final system that we have seen in decades, and that is the introduction of a wildcard round. And whilst on paper it sounds great, more footy, more drama, more teams still in the hunt, I guess, this actually isn't about the fans. This is about money, and this is about rewarding mediocrity, and that is what we are going to get into today. So strap yourselves in. Welcome to The Breakdown with Jared Davis, a show that I was going to make next year for the AFL and for World Sport, but this news is so big that I've decided to bring it early. So we aren't even in the studio that we are going to be recording in next year for this show. We are going to have all sorts of things from previews and breakdowns and interviews and analysis and everything else in between. Everything you want in a footy show, but you don't get at the moment. We are going to bring you live here every single week, twice a week. But we've had to set it off like a month early because of this news that has just come out about the wildcard round. So in case you didn't know how it is going to work, we are still going to have an 8-team traditional final series. It's just that instead of the team that finishes 7th and 8th being the 7th and 8th position in that final series, we are now going to have 7th play 10th and 8th plays 9th. And the winner of those two games will be the 7th and 8th seed in the traditional AFL finals bracket, which essentially means we are just creating another elimination final just for the bottom two teams of the top 8. Now, the AFL is going to come out and defend this and say this is going to increase interest, create more footy, fill the bye week in with something that is AFL related, and keep fans engaged with their teams for longer throughout the season. And all of that is true to a certain extent. Whilst it will absolutely increase viewership because adding extra any game will logically increase viewership because you're adding another game to the pile of things that people can watch. So even if one person watches the game, it is still increasing viewership. And then again, logically, by having an expanded final series, there are now more teams that are going to be in the hunt for finals. So everything I said that the AFL will say is technically true, but there are just so many issues with this initiative as a whole. First, and this is plain and simple, we are now rewarding mediocrity. Historically, the 10th place team in an AFL season has finished with a losing record, which means we are now going to have teams play finals football that don't have a winning record. That is genuinely the definition of rewarding mediocrity. The second big issue that I see with this is it makes it infinitely more difficult for the 7th place team and the 8th place team to actually win a premiership. Now, that doesn't happen often, but we do often see these teams make a prelim final. Now they are going to have to play an extra 2 games to win the premiership. So, for example, if your team finishes 7th on the ladder, you are now going to have to play 5 games to win the flag. Whereas if you finish 4th, you are only going to have to play 3. And to put that into context, both Gold Coast and Hawthorn, who finished 7th and 8th this season, who finished just 1 game out of the top 4, they finished 1 game behind 4th place, are now going to need to win 2 more games than that top 4 team to win the premiership. Which means we are now asking teams which has earned the final series spot being in the top 8, because we will still have a top 8. Now we are asking them to play another elimination final, which opens the door up for just more players and teams getting injured. And the third real issue that I see behind this is the actual motivation behind this decision. And the AFL is going to come out and say the things that I said before, that it's going to increase drama and increase viewership and blah, blah, blah. But realistically, the only reason why this change is coming is because of money. The AFL makes over half of its revenue from the broadcast deal, a deal that is now worth $4.5 billion, which just ended its first season. And to justify the investment from Channel 7 and Foxtel, which is now owned by a company called DAZN, the AFL has to increase viewership by a massive amount. But given the low standard of play this season on those marquee nights, being Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night football, these broadcasters just did not get the return on investment that they wanted to get this season. Eddie Maguire, who is arguably the biggest businessman in the AFL, arguably the biggest media mogul in the AFL, he's already come out and said that DAZN, the new owners of the broadcast rights deal, are already upset by the deal, which is somewhat understandable given the fact that the deal is absolutely massive. This broadcast rights deal was signed in 2022 and it only came into effect this season, and it's got another 6 more seasons after this. And DAZN, the new owners, they actually, I would think they barely know what the AFL is. To them, this deal isn't as massive as a lot of their other streaming rights deals, but they will still be looking at the money and going, why are we spending so much money when we're not getting the return on investment that we thought we would get, considering that the AFL numbers have gone up technically, but have not gone up at the rate needed to get a massive return on investment, considering the massive investment that the broadcast partners put in to this new broadcast deal. And it's not just the wildcard round that feeds into this. The fact that the AFL is bringing back State of Origin, the fact that the AFL is going to change the grand final from the afternoon slot to the nighttime slot is a result of the AFL being in a desperate need to increase interest and viewership. The broadcasters are hell-bent on recouping their investment, which makes a lot of sense. They put a lot of money into the league. They want to get the return on investment that they thought they were going to get. And one way to do that is to just add more things, add more marquee games, add more eyeball-driven drama and product into the sport, which at a level is a really good thing. The State of Origin could be a really good thing. The nighttime grand final could be a really good thing. But when you're mixing increasing viewership with lowering the standard of play like the wildcard round does, that is where I come in and I have an issue. And the biggest irony of this whole thing is that the AFL is doing this to increase viewership, which is fine. I get that. The AFL has to expand. We have to expand. The media coverage has to expand. The money has to get bigger so that the players continue to get paid more, so that the game continues to grow. I understand that completely. But instead of fixing the root cause of viewership issues, they're just creating and inventing more product and creating fake drama to bridge the gap. Instead of fixing the quality of player development, umpiring inconsistency, the lack of fan access, the lack of actually engaging content and promotion of the sport, the compromised draft, the pricing out of fans, and the million other issues that the AFL has going on, they just adding more product to the market and saying, have more, I guess. Have more substandard product. And the more I think about it, it is essentially like having a broken table. And instead of fixing the table, you just buy a really nice, expensive tablecloth. And then from the outside, it looks like the table's fine until someone actually goes to try and use the table and they realize that it's broken. And we are going to get to that point. So it's great. Wildcard round, huge. More teams invested, more teams interested in the later part of the season, more games, State of Origin, awesome, blah, blah, blah. That's the fancy tablecloth that is covering the broken table, which is the broken state of the game, the consistent rule changes, the inconsistent umpiring, the draft compromisation. And I'm not just going to sit here and complain, although that is what I've been doing for the last 10 minutes. I will provide at least some of the thoughts on why, on how I think the AFL can increase viewership and interest from fans. And I think there's actually a lot they can do. One, return more of the money that the AFL gets from the broadcast deal and from their partners and from their advertising and from their merch and sponsors and ticket sales and all of those sort of things, and invest it in player development. That would be a really good start. Clubs don't have enough money at the moment to invest in player development. The soft cap is still low. The fact that we have all of our superstars of the game immediately going to the media because working in clubland is just not as lucrative is a massive issue in the league. If you have the best players in the league, when they retire, you want them in clubland teaching the next generation. You don't want them going to the media and taking massive pay salaries and leaving the development of the game in the hands of people who are less qualified and getting less remuneration. You want the best players in the league, when they retire, to be the best coaches in the league. That is what you want. And I have a very strong opinion of this, and there are people who have a very strong opinion to the other way, and I completely understand that. Clubs want this. Players want this. Clubs want this. A lot of fan bases want this because more chances to make the finals is a win in their book, and more money. I get it. It's hope. It's more money. It's an extra home game. I understand all of those things. My issue is more with the underlying reasons why, and the fact that the AFL refuses to fix the underlying issues and instead is just buying a brand new tablecloth to cover the broken table. Because in my opinion, finals should be sacred. They shouldn't be a lifeline for teams that almost made it. We want the finals to be a hard and fast rule of if you don't make the finals, you don't get to play finals. You don't get a second chance to win a final. What we used to do was celebrate greatness. We used to celebrate the teams that made the finals. We used to celebrate teams that made the top 8 in an 18-team league, because if you made the top 8 in an 18-team league, that meant you were above the average. That is what we were celebrating. That is what made September football so good. We were seeing teams that were above average. Literally, logically, technically, they were above the average AFL team. That is what made it so good. We used to celebrate that, and now we're commercializing mediocrity. We are promoting and rewarding and commercializing mediocre teams. And maybe that is what the modern game is. But I don't want that to be the modern game, because the modern game should be harnessing the greatness of these teams, promoting the greatness of being a top 8 team in an 18-team league. But hey, this is just my opinion. So what do you think? Is the wild card a great idea in your opinion? Is it awesome? Am I wrong? Or is it, in my opinion, just a cash grab in disguise to essentially please the broadcasters? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But I'm Jared Davis, and that was The Breakdown.